the way trash has evolved from what it was maybe 20 years ago to what it is now. Where a bottle of water, when filled with water, is valuable, can quench our thirst, but as soon as that water is out, it's a disposable plastic bottle. In fact, it says that on that label itself, that do not reuse it again, crush it and throw it. And that's what we're going to be really concentrating about, that what are the implications of really trash, the way it's disposed, how it's disposed, to whom it's disposed. This bag, where do you think this bag goes? Once we bundle it up in our homes, in our offices, where does this eventually lead to? Goes to landfills, dumping grounds, or ends up in the oceans? Yes. So essentially, while after putting it in that bin, it goes to that nice big black bag where we see everywhere, and then goes into a big community dumpster, or it goes to the porikarmika's hand who puts it in the community dumpster. But essentially, there is no really throwing away, because that away is someone's here and now. And that essentially really looks like this. It are those open dumping grounds. They're called black spots. We also have garbage dumping grounds, something like landfills that some of you said, or it goes into our water bodies like our rivers and our oceans. That's typically where our trash ends up. Unfortunately, not most of it ends up over here or in recycling, like one of us said. When we throw away trash the way we typically have and always have been doing, there are several implications when it comes to the environment itself. Burning of trash has been a pretty standard Indian way of dealing with trash, but the kind of implications that has is huge, because A, it's mixed waste that's being burned up. Second, a lot of plastic material is being burned up, and plastic typically consists, when gets burnt in non-scientific conditions, produces something called dioxins. Dioxins are one of the dirty dozen chemicals as classified by the WHO and are known to cause cancer and other health-related diseases. So our air, because of improper disposal of trash, gets severely affected. So be it our soil, be it our water, be it our air, the quality of all of these things gets severely hampered when it comes to improper disposal of trash. This is a picture of the albatross, which is a bird found in the Midway Island on the Pacific Ocean. The story essentially goes like this. These birds started picking up pieces of plastic that were floating on the ocean because they mistook it for fish eggs, which is essentially their food, because the plastic in the ocean was there for decades and started breaking down into really small pieces. They started picking it up and started feeding it to their chicks. So the chick started, of course, the parent is feeding the chick, so the chick is taking it in, and after a while their population started dwindling and they started dying, not because of eating plastic but because of starvation, because plastic filled up their belly so much that they couldn't eat more food for nutrition to happen. And those are the kind of implications that improper disposal of trash has on our wildlife around us. That's a real picture of a village right outside of Bangalore. It's one of Bangalore's oldest dumping grounds called Mandur. This is essentially what someone's backyard looks like. So when we speak about social injustice of trash, there are various aspects to it. One is, who is it to which our trash is going, and the second is also, who are the folks who are managing our trash. And so talking a little bit in detail about where our trash is going, in most cities, in fact in all big metropolitan cities, there are dumping grounds, garbage dumping grounds that essentially start off as, okay, this is a place where we're going to collect some trash, but then starts building into huge mounds. Folks living around these dumping grounds areas, that's where historically, typically their homes have been, have their lifespan reduced by more than 10 to 20 years. Compared to a regular ordinary citizen living in the heart of the city. These women are actually holding up samples of, guess what? Yeah, their groundwater. That's what their groundwater essentially looks like. And on the left is a picture of folks who handle our trash day in and day out. Even the kind of rights that porikarmika have become better over the years. But if we give them mixed waste, I know, and I have had my conversations with my porikarmika who comes home to collect our trash, and when folks mix their broken glass, their medical waste with their regular waste, they start getting cuts on their hands, and while working with trash or while working with soil sanitary napkins that are not wrapped up properly, they are exposed to a bunch of diseases and ailments that they have to really figure out how to deal with, but because of the economic conditions, it's a vicious cycle that doesn't really help them get out of it. These women are actually taking out mixed waste from their hands in that from that dumpster truck. Yes, which is why we come to the really most important question of all, which we believe is the crux and the bulk of the session, which is what can we do about it? What can you and I together, how can we really try and fix this in whatever way, in whatever capacity that's possible? What do we do about the waste that's already existing? To put it more simply, how do we manage our waste that's currently existing, that's there, right? So for that, it's a pretty much simple 3-step solution, which is segregate, recycle and compost. This is a really simple 3-step procedure that can fix a lot of what we were seeing, the problem that we were seeing associated with trash before. Waste can, in the most primary way, be segregated into 3 categories, and these are 3 categories that it can be segregated into. So what we're going to do now is we're going to segregate waste real time. Invite you all to come up. We have some waste over here that we're going to put out. The 3 categories that we had were of recyclable, food waste and reject waste. So this waste is clean and it's dried, so don't worry about getting your hands dirty, which you anyway will. So go ahead, whatever you remember from that last slide, go on and segregate the waste that you see. Do whatever you think is right, and that's fine. But what we're going to do is very quickly go into where does this waste go, right, and what really happens to it. The first category that we'll probably try and understand is paper. But before actually going to this, I want to say that this exercise is also highly dependent on the kind of local waste infrastructure that we are in. Paper, recyclable, paper, not paper, cardboard, recyclable, cardboard. Great. So a lot of paper cups come with a lining, which is what makes paper cups waterproof, right, and liquid proof. I know that a lot of the times when you're switching from, say, drinking our beverages in plastic and paper, we're like, hey, at least I'm not using plastic. But there's a coating of plastic right in over here, which when gets in contact with hot beverages, ends up going into our systems as well in the form of microplastics. But again, depending on infrastructure, this can be recycled for now in many places across Bangalore. This is a highly mixed form of paper with something that we call MLP, multi-layered packaging. It has plastic and paper infused to such an extent that's really difficult to take it out. So this essentially goes to, unfortunately, reject waste. The same could be said about Tetra Pak, but that's not the case because now we have some stellar infrastructure in Bangalore to be able to actually recycle Tetra Pak into chipboards, into plywood boards, into in fact furniture. There's an office in Mumbai that Scrap has worked with that helped them design their furniture with recycled Tetra Pak, right? Tetra Pak actually has 3 to 4 different types of materials fused in together, paper, aluminum, plastic, all like really super compacted, which is what keeps the ingredients inside it fresh. But this can be recycled for now, which is why it will go over here. Next we can come to plastic. So plastic is recyclable. Something that's really fascinating is that plastic has different, how it's going to be recycled is in different ways. When we have a plastic bottle, the wrapper gets recycled separately, this gets recycled separately, and the cap and this gets recycled separately. Milk packets, plastic, again, just coming to how we also use our waste. While we cut our milk packets or cut any packet, it's good to not, I can see a lot of head nods and I'm glad, it's good to not cut the entire ear off because that becomes a really small piece, then which is really difficult to recycle. So if accidentally you are cutting a small piece, just put it in a plastic bag and then like nicely roll it up, or best is to just cut it in such a way that it opens up like this. So plastic is over here. This is also plastic. Do you remember those plastic tags that supermarkets give us when they tie bags everywhere? I remember coming to him with a bunch of plastic tags. He's like, oh, this can be recycled for sure. But then when given individually, they're going to get lost in this vast space, right? No one's going to be able to find them. And the amount of time the waste workers over here spend segregating the waste, it's not it's not economically feasible to spend that time and energy hunting out really small pieces of plastic. So it's really important to also understand that when we're giving our waste for recycling, it's good to give it in a form of bulk, because that's how really recycling of trash works. It works in volumes. This is a non-woven bag. It looks and feels like cloth bags, and when the Bangalore plastic ban came into being, a bunch of shops just started giving this. But unfortunately, it's as bad as plastic bags, if not more, because this doesn't have cloth at all. It's easily terrible. It has small plastic granules that are then stuck along with gum or glue and then gives us this. But this has very low durability and iska kuch nahi ho sakta. This is reject waste. Coming to one of the biggest sort of contributors to waste is textile waste. This cloth is lined with Fevicol, which is why it renders it non-recyclable. But when cloth is clean, cloth is non-synthetic, cloth is cotton based, it can be recycled into cotton waste, that the one that's used in garages to actually clean up machinery, right, or during construction. So this is right now reject. This very interestingly is not paper. This is made up of sugarcane bagasse, which is when the juice of sugarcane is taken, when agricultural waste is left. A bunch of companies in India are now making compostable cutlery out of this. So this and this and this, when broken or shredded into smaller pieces, they can all be composted. So this essentially will come into food waste. Though it's not food, but it comes from food, it's organic waste, which is why this is going to come, and this is going to be able to biodegrade at the end. This is plain cotton. So if this is, say for example, soaked with blood or has been used to treat someone medically, this becomes biomedical waste and then goes into reject waste, or goes into incineration, which India doesn't really have the best technology for yet. So we put this into reject, considering that if that was soiled. This interestingly we put in recycling. This is actually synthetic material of cloth. It's not going to get recycled, and this has 3 different types of materials in it. The leaves inside are organic waste, this outside is reject waste, the thread is recyclable, and the paper is recyclable. So a tea bag, something as small as a tea bag, has 3 to 4 different components, which is why if we can choose to like really use a infuser, or if we can go to our tea bags, that's probably better. These are fancier versions that say like, I look eco-friendly, but not really. The paper bags also, the paper in the tea bags are also having a plastic lining, and that's how they don't really just dissolve when put in hot beverages, right? So this is because it's mixed waste, this is going to go into reject. Great. So one more category of course is e-waste that we haven't put in now to just reduce complexity. This will come in another category of waste. This plastic is recyclable. Colored plastic is not in huge demand, does not have the best facilities to get recycled, therefore this is going to become non-recyclable. Now we come to something that we see pretty much everywhere around us, which is chips wrappers and biscuit wrappers, and maybe our small toffees that are there, right? In some places this goes into recycling, in some places it doesn't, but essentially what happens to these are sent into centers where they get burnt at high temperatures, like cement kilns, which are then used as fuel. But because these are not closed up properly, the kind of air pollution burning of these causes is pretty intense, right? It's a lot. So yes, these are for now currently we'll put it in recyclable, because in this facility this goes into cement kilns. And earbud also has different materials in it, which is why it can't really be recycled, because it has plastic and cotton. But if we remove the cotton, bunch up all our plastic these things, then it can be, but for now it's not, so non-recyclable. Sanitary waste, when soiled with blood, nothing can happen of it. The only thing that really can happen is it gets buried in a small plot, but then that leads to soil pollution, and our cities don't really have that kind of infrastructure anymore to do it. Balloons unfortunately cannot be recycled, so all balloon lovers, non-recyclable. Thermocol and some paper recyclable, it's going to come here. Styrofoam is currently recyclable, so it's going to come here. Oh, toothpaste, if cleaned properly inside with water, rinsed nicely, can be recycled. It's a job of the person who's throwing, the consumer, to be able to clean this properly and then send it out. But that unfortunately is not happening. With dry waste recycling, one of the keys is of course quantities when they're really small pieces, and second is cleanliness and it being dry. So those are really important. If a lot of folks around Bangalore actually cleaned their waste and gave it over here, the places that we're sitting over here would be pristine, would be like our homes, right? But unfortunately they're not, because they're dealing with a lot of dirt that comes along with waste. So in some ways, pretty much, to be able to tackle the problem of waste, one of the solutions especially is to be able to, like we said, manage your waste. But if we can manage our waste in a decentralized manner, because centralization of waste currently is not really efficient and effective, and has a lot of complexities and issues around it. So essentially, when segregated, all this recyclable waste then goes into a recycling facility and gets turned into new products. Have you seen those thelewalas or thelewalis who come outside the house with those really colorful plastic buckets and boxes? Have you noticed if their plastic is slightly weaker than the rest of the plastic, it's slightly more breakable? So that's essentially non-virgin plastics. That's plastic that has been recycled again to then give those products, right? So a lot of the plastic can be recycled, but just one heads up about recycling itself. It is in one way a measure that's it's a stopgap bit of a measure, because recycling also takes a lot of energy and water to be able to bring out new products. When segregated, all our food scraps can be turned into compost. And we're going to spend a couple of minutes around composting itself. What we're going to do now is we're going to do a quick demo of how composting can be done. So this is the Daily Dump Khamba's miniature version. The Khamba is one of the composters that's available widely over the country and in Bangalore. It started in Bangalore today. So what we're going to do is we're going to see how composting can be possible. These are the three parts of the Khamba. This is say part C, this is part B and part A. How part C is different is it's closed over here. So the first step is to put some newspaper and put some dry leaves in part C so that it can collect some of the liquid that drops down. And after putting some dry leaves, you can put component B and component A. So in this, we layer it with newspaper and put some brown matter. So our ready compost mixed with some extra microbes is called browns, and these are greens. The idea behind this is to just do 2:1, which is 2 parts of greens and 1 part of brown. By layering it like that, our food waste can be composted into this. So how we begin essentially is by taking some paper, take some compost or browns, put one layer of it, put 1 part greens over here, cover it up, and then put some greens. Make sure it's not too much, it's around 1 or 1.5 inches, and then put half of those browns again. But something that's really key and very important over here is to make sure that the greens are completely covered by the browns, so that the food matter is not exposed to flies around. Balance between the browns and the greens is super important, because that's what maintains the carbon and nitrogen ratio. The browns gives in the carbon and the greens gives in the nitrogen. The greens get covered with 1 part of browns, and it's covered up until you have the next set of food waste that comes in. After doing this, after this part is filled, one has to just interchange this, and for the next 20 to 30 days, this will fill up. Of course, not this one, the bigger version of this will get filled up. And after that, this is going to be almost 75 to 80% decomposed already. It just needs a little more time for it to mature. So we're going to take this part, that the first component A that we had, and pour it into our last container, where it's going to sit for some time, mature, and then we have this empty, and we're going to fill it up again, and the cycle continues. What is really important in compost is to also not press it. Aeration is key in composting, because that's when a lot of microbes are going to come in and come out. So yeah, by composting and recycling our waste, more than 80% of our waste can be diverted from dumping grounds, and only that 20 or less than 20% is going to be landfill waste at the end of the day. But just talking about composting, one last thing, how composting really works is when the microbes start feeding on the surface area, right? So as much as we increase the surface area of the greens that we put in, the better that is. So instead of putting in whole orange or a whole lemon, it's good to be able to cut that into a couple of pieces and then put it in. It's going to decompose and break down faster. We feel like this is This is definitely the biggest tenet of sustainability that there is, to be able to reduce and refuse. So even small hacks as carrying our own water bottles, carrying our own utensils, or a dabba with a spork, a spoon and a fork at two ends, and of course putting that bag in our pockets or in our bags, the small bag wherever we go, to prevent the use of a plastic bag, or even buying a new cloth bag itself. I think there are plenty of cloth bags that we already have now. The third step is to actually understanding how to really be a conscious consumer, right? Being able to make our choices with the kind of materials we buy, products that we buy in the market. It's okay to go. It's one thing to go and say, hey, you should not do this. Mineral bottle company should not be actually producing so much bottles, but then going and buying those same bottles again, because that's not going to, our activism is not going to hit them as much as our consumer choices are going to hit them. So being able to be a conscious consumer, being able to buy things that are not, that do not have as much synthetic and difficult to recycle items that they already are. Moving on, this is, I would say, step 0 of sustainability in general. Can we just start with using what we have? If we can just make do with what we have, don't go ahead and buy new things, we can really figure out a bunch of things. So this is essentially, at least for us at Scrap and for me, step 0 in figuring out how to lead a sustainable lifestyle. And the last one essentially is to participate and contribute to environmental causes. There are a bunch of protests happening, be it Fridays for Future, be it Extinction Rebellion. They all have Bangalore chapters. Even the steel flyover Beda in some ways is a huge way of actually showing citizen activism, right? And in Bangalore, we are really fortunate to have an ecosystem that helps us be able to know about it and take part, and again, like, make sure that we can do our bit by taking part, or if we are not really comfortable in taking part in those protests, contributing and making donations to organizations that crowdfund these activities. We're now going to go into just having a brief of the kind of work that Scrap does. We work with large scale events. We worked with an office in Bangalore called MIQ. They started off with producing around almost 40 kgs of waste per day, and then we led them through a waste reduction process and segregation at source. They now compost all their waste in-house in the office, and they're now only throwing away less than 2 kgs every day after working with them. So around 95% of their waste is being diverted from landfills every day. So those are the composters that you see, and we do a bunch of workshops with the employees regularly to be able to sensitize them to the processes that are available. We also work with large scale events. We worked with Bacardi NH7 Weekender Pune, where we've actually diverted around 85% to more waste, and same for festivals across the country, be it Delhi, Varanasi. So we divert anywhere between 85 to 95% of the waste depending on the waste that's generated. So I'd like to just leave you with a bunch of pictures and being able to understand and leave us at, I think, one of the questions that was started by asking that, hey, we have so much waste, there is so much waste in the oceans, what do we do about it? And I think it pretty much comes back to just being mindful of the way we consume, the way our friends and family consume, and trying to actually understand that and get a better sense. Thank you. Thank you so much for being a part of this.